The day I inherited my grandfather James's mansion should have been a moment of quiet reflection and gratitude. The Victorian masterpiece stood as a testament to his life's work, a sprawling estate filled with intricate carvings, grand staircases, and stained glass windows that caught the morning sun just right. This wasn't just a house. It was history, memory, and legacy wrapped into one. My heart swelled with a mix of responsibility and pride as I stepped through the heavy oak doors for the first time as its rightful owner. But the peace didn't last long. Amanda, my wife, and Evelyn, her overbearing mother, arrived unannounced that very afternoon. Their grand entrance disrupted the stillness, Evelyn's loud voice echoing off the high ceilings as she scrutinized the property with thinly veiled disdain. "It's charming in a dated way," she commented, running a manicured finger across a dusty banister. Amanda, once my biggest cheerleader, seemed to have inherited her mother's critical eye overnight. "We could really make this place into something spectacular," she added, her gaze sweeping over the intricate woodwork as if it were a problem to solve rather than a masterpiece to preserve. The insinuation started immediately. Evelyn declared that the house was too outdated and would need modernizing to match their standards. She spoke as though she owned the place, as though she were the one James had trusted with his life's work. My attempts to explain the mansion's historical significance were met with condescension. "History is fine for museums, Nathan," Evelyn scoffed, "but no one actually wants to live in it." Their dismissive attitude hit me harder than I expected. James had poured his soul into this house, and their casual disregard for his vision felt like a betrayal. The mansion was more than just a building. It was a piece of my family's story, and I wasn't about to let them strip it of its meaning. As the afternoon wore on, Evelyn unveiled her plans. Tear down the original architecture, gut the interior, and replace it with something modern and livable. Contractors, she claimed, would be on site within the week to begin drafting renovation plans. Amanda, to my dismay, nodded in agreement. "It'll be better for all of us," she said, as if it were a foregone conclusion. I barely recognized her. "I don't think so," I said firmly, my voice cutting through Evelyn's tirade about open floor plans and marble finishes. Both women paused, clearly unused to hearing me push back. "This house isn't just property. It's a legacy, and I have no intention of erasing that." Evelyn rolled her eyes. "Nathan, you're being sentimental. This is about the future, not clinging to the past." Amanda remained silent, her expression unreadable. For a moment, I hoped she might defend me, but she didn't. Instead, she looked away, as if avoiding the conflict altogether. As the evening drew to a close, Evelyn's parting words lingered in the air like a challenge. "You'll see reasons soon enough, Nathan," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "This house needs a woman's touch." After they left, I wandered through the empty halls of the mansion, the echoes of their voices replaced by the comforting creaks and whispers of the old house settling for the night. James's presence felt stronger here, as if he were watching, waiting to see what I would do. I ran my fingers along the ornate carvings on the banister, thinking of the stories this house held, the memories it protected. This was a test, I realized, not just of my resolve, but of my loyalty to James's memory and everything he had stood for. Evelyn and Amanda had made their intentions clear, but they didn't know the mansion the way I did. They didn't know the man who had built it, or the quiet strength he had passed down to me. The house wasn't just an inheritance. It was a battleground, and I was ready to fight. The morning after Evelyn and Amanda's unwelcome visit, I woke up with a lingering sense of unease. The mansion, usually so serene in its grandeur, felt charged with tension. I stood in the kitchen, sipping coffee, staring out at the overgrown garden James had once tended with pride. His legacy was all around me, and it was under threat. By noon, the first shot in the battle for the mansion was fired. A delivery truck pulled into the driveway, its sides emblazoned with the logo of a high-end design firm. I stepped outside as two designers unloaded blueprints and swatches, their polished appearances a sharp contrast to the house's rustic charm. "What's going on here?" I asked, my voice steady but edged with irritation. The lead designer barely glanced at me as he flipped through a portfolio. Mrs. Evelyn Ashcroft commissioned us to draw up plans for renovations, he said briskly. We're here to assess the property. Without missing a beat, he gestured toward the porch. We're thinking floor-to-ceiling glass windows here. Maybe knock out that wall for an open concept. The Victorian style is charming, but this house is not being renovated, I interrupted, stepping between him and the door. You're trespassing. The designer blinked, clearly enthused to being challenged. But Mrs. Ashcroft, I'm the owner, I said, cutting him off. And you can leave. He hesitated, looking as though he wanted to argue, but the intensity in my gaze must have convinced him otherwise. Muttering under his breath, he signaled for his team to pack up their materials. I watched them drive away, but the victory felt hollow. I knew this was only the beginning. Hours later, Amanda called. Her tone was clipped, her words carefully measured. Nathan, why did you send the designers away? Because they had no business being here, I replied, my frustration barely contained. Amanda, this is my inheritance. This is James's legacy. How can you and your mother not see that? Her silence stretched uncomfortably. Nathan, we're just trying to help, she said finally. This house could be something incredible if you'd let us make a few changes. It already is incredible, I shot back. It doesn't need changes. It needs respect. The conversation ended abruptly, leaving me more determined than ever to protect what James had entrusted to me. But as the days passed, Evelyn's attempts to impose her will escalated. Contractors began showing up uninvited, asking to assess structural changes. I turned them away each time, my irritation growing with every encounter. Amanda, meanwhile, was becoming a stranger. She stopped engaging in our conversations about the house, brushing off my concerns with vague assurances that everything would work out. She spent more and more time at Evelyn's estate, returning home late with excuses that didn't add up. The turning point came when I discovered a draft proposal for the mansion's transformation on the kitchen counter. Evelyn's name was boldly stamped across the top, and the plans were horrifying. Entire sections of the house were slated for demolition, including James's cherished study and the grand staircase he designed himself. The garden would be replaced by a sleek pool deck, and the intricate woodwork that gave the house its soul would be replaced by modern, sterile finishes. I called Amanda immediately. What is this? I demanded, holding the proposal in front of me as if she could see it through the phone. It's just an idea, she said dismissively. Nathan, you're overreacting. Overreacting? My voice rose. They want to tear down everything James worked for, everything this house represents. It's not just about the house, she said, her tone defensive. It's about our future. Don't you want a better life for us? Her words hit me like a slap. A better life? I echoed. Amanda, this house is our future. It's our son's legacy. She sighed heavily. Maybe you're too attached to the past to see what's best for us. The line went dead before I could respond, leaving me seething with frustration. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about control, respect, and the fundamental values that Amanda and I had clearly stopped sharing. That evening, as I sat in James's study, I felt the weight of the battle ahead. Evelyn and Amanda weren't going to back down, and neither was I. The mansion wasn't just wood and stone. It was the heart of my family's story, and I was prepared to fight tooth and nail to protect it. The battle lines were drawn. Now, it was time to strategize. The mansion had always been more than a house. It was a living testament to James's ingenuity, resilience, and the pride he had in preserving his legacy. That legacy felt more fragile than ever, under constant threat from Evelyn's ambition and Amanda's indifference. Determined not to lose ground, I spent more time exploring the house, hoping to reconnect with James's spirit and uncover something, anything, that might strengthen my resolve. One evening, while wandering through the study, I noticed something unusual about one of the bookshelves. It seemed oddly misaligned, slightly protruding from the wall. Intrigued, I pulled at the edges, and with a faint creak, the entire unit shifted to reveal a small compartment hidden behind it. Inside, there was a single, weathered envelope with my name scrawled across the front in James's unmistakable handwriting. My heart pounded as I opened it, carefully unfolding the letter within. The familiar scent of old parchment and ink filled the air. James's words were written with his characteristic precision. Nathan, if you're reading this, it means the mansion has passed into your care. This house holds more than just memories. It holds power. Not the kind of power that commands wealth or influence, but the power of preservation, the strength to withstand greed and the passage of time. There will be those who see this mansion as an opportunity to gain for themselves, to exploit its value without understanding its significance. To them, this is just property, but to us, it's history, family, and integrity. I've taken steps to safeguard this place. You'll find answers hidden in the house, should you need them. Look closely, Nathan, and trust your instincts. The mansion is yours to protect, but you'll need to be steadfast. Not everyone will understand, and not everyone will have your best interests at heart. Stand firm, grandson. Some battles are worth fighting, with pride and love. James. I reread the letter, feeling a surge of determination. James had known this fight was coming. He had anticipated challenges, and more importantly, he had believed in my ability to face them. But what did he mean by answers hidden in the house? What safeguards had he put in place? My mind raced with possibilities, and I resolved to dig deeper into the mansion's secrets. The next morning, I reached out to Clara, an old friend and history enthusiast with a knack for uncovering obscure details. If anyone could help me understand James's cryptic warning, it was her. When I explained the situation, she didn't hesitate to offer her assistance. Your grandfather was a clever man, she said. If he left clues, they'll be worth finding. Clara arrived later that day, armed with research materials and a determination that matched my own. Together, we began combing through the mansion, starting with the study where I had found the letter. Clara examined the room with an almost forensic attention to detail, her eyes scanning the intricate carvings and shelves with the precision of a detective. Hours into our search, Clara uncovered something intriguing, a subtle carving on the base of the grand fireplace. It depicted a compass rose, with one section slightly raised. When I pressed it, a concealed drawer popped open, revealing a bundle of documents tied with a red ribbon. Inside were detailed records of the mansion's construction, legal deeds, and personal notes from James. Among them was a passage that caught my attention. Inheritances can be both a gift and a burden. I've ensured that this house will remain in the family, untouched by those who seek to exploit it. The terms are clear. This property cannot be sold, demolished, or altered without the explicit consent of the rightful heir. I've also protected its historical status, ensuring its preservation under law. This house is a fortress, but it requires a guardian to defend it. Clara let out a low whistle. Your grandfather wasn't playing around, she said. This is ironclad. If anyone tries to mess with this place, they'll hit a wall of legal obstacles. I felt a surge of relief and pride. James had thought of everything, leaving me not only the mansion but the tools to protect it. Clara's enthusiasm was infectious as she began piecing together the mansion's story, unearthing its historical significance and the reasons James had fought so hard to preserve it. As night fell, the mansion felt different, alive with purpose. James's words echoed in my mind, "Stand firm, grandson." The cryptic warning had become a guiding light, reminding me that this was more than a fight over property. It was a battle for legacy, integrity, and family. The stage was set. Armed with James's wisdom and the knowledge hidden within the mansion, I was ready to face whatever came next. Evelyn and Amanda wouldn't know what hit them. Evelyn's assault on the mansion began in earnest, her ambition as relentless as it was infuriating. Contractors and designers arrived at the property daily, all under the false assumption that she had the authority to implement changes. Trucks filled with construction equipment rolled into the driveway, and their presence cast an unwelcome shadow over the estate. I stood on the porch one morning as a contractor unloaded rolls of blueprints onto the gravel path. He nodded at me with a polite smile. "We're here for the renovation walkthrough," he said, gesturing toward the front door. I folded my arms. "Who hired you?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Mrs. Ashcroft," he replied confidently, oblivious to the tension in my stance. "We're converting the study into an open-concept lounge, also replacing the garden with a modern pool deck." Shouldn't take more than 6 months. I clenched my fists but maintained my composure. Let me save you the trouble, I said firmly. You're not renovating anything. This property belongs to me, and your services are not required. He blinked, clearly caught off guard. I should call Mrs. Ashcroft. Feel free, I said, stepping closer. But the answer isn't changing. True to form, Evelyn arrived within the hour, marching into the mansion like a general inspecting a battlefield. Nathan, she said, her tone dripping with faux civility. What's the meaning of this? These contractors are here to improve the property. Why are you sending them away? Because this is my house, I replied, my voice steady. And I'm not authorizing any changes. She rolled her eyes, waving a hand dismissively. You're being unreasonable. This house is a relic, Nathan. It needs a complete overhaul if it's going to have any value. It already has value, I shot back. More than you could ever understand. Amanda trailed behind her mother, her expression neutral but distant. When I met her eyes, she quickly looked away. Nathan, we just want what's best for everyone, she said quietly, though there was no conviction in her voice. What's best for everyone, I repeated. Or what's best for Evelyn? Amanda flinched, but Evelyn didn't miss a beat. Nathan, you're acting like a child. This house is part of the family now, and we all have a say in its future. No, I said firmly, meeting her gaze without flinching. I have a say, and I say no renovations. Evelyn's composure cracked for a moment, her jaw tightening. We'll see about that, she said, turning on her heel and storming out. The tension between Amanda and me grew sharper in the days that followed. She spent more time at her mother's estate, returning late at night with vague excuses about family obligations. When I tried to address the situation, she brushed me off, insisting that I was overreacting. It was Clara who provided the first real breakthrough. After days of research, she called me with an update. Nathan, you're not going to believe this, she said. I've been digging into Evelyn's financial history, and it's a mess. Failed investments, lawsuits, debts, it's all there. What does that have to do with the mansion? I asked, though I suspected the answer. Everything, Clara replied. Evelyn's hoping to exploit the property's value to bail herself out. If she can convince you to agree to renovations, she can justify a massive appraisal and use the house as collateral for a loan. The pieces fell into place. Evelyn didn't care about preserving the mansion's charm or honoring its history. To her, it was nothing more than a golden ticket out of her financial troubles. I felt a mix of anger and resolve. Thank you, Clara, I said. This changes everything. Evelyn's invasion wasn't just about aesthetics, it was about control. She saw the mansion as her salvation, and Amanda, whether knowingly or not, had become complicit in her schemes. But with Clara's discoveries and the safeguards James had put in place, I finally had the leverage I needed. That evening, as I walked through the mansion's dimly lit halls, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. James's words echoed in my mind, "Stand firm." The battle was far from over, but for the first time, I felt like I had the upper hand. Evelyn and Amanda thought they could steamroll me, but they underestimated the strength of the mansion's history and the determination of the man who now protected it. The next morning, I woke with a renewed determination. Clara's revelations about Evelyn's financial desperation were still fresh in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the mansion held more answers. James had anticipated challenges like this, and I was certain he had left me more than just words of encouragement. I returned to the study, the room where I'd found his first letter, and began to search. My eyes scanned every surface, every corner, hoping for a sign. It wasn't long before my gaze landed on the portrait of James that hung above the fireplace. His steady, knowing eyes seemed to follow me as I moved closer. I ran my fingers along the edges of the ornate frame, noticing something I hadn't before, a faint gap between the canvas and the frame. My curiosity piqued. I carefully removed the painting from the wall, revealing a small safe embedded in the plaster behind it. My pulse quickened. James had hidden something important here. The safe required a combination, but as I stared at the dial, a memory surfaced. James used to chuckle about how people overcomplicated security. The best codes are ones you'll never forget, he'd said. I tried his birth date. Nothing. Then the year the mansion was built. Still nothing. Finally, I entered the date of our last fishing trip together, a day he'd often described as one of his happiest. The lock clicked open. Inside, I found a folder filled with documents bound by a leather strap. There were legal papers, old photographs, and a second letter addressed to me. I unfolded it carefully. James's precise handwriting as clear as if he had just written it yesterday. Nathan, if you found this, then you're facing challenges I hoped you wouldn't have to endure. This mansion is more than a home. It's a fortress, a legacy built to withstand the tests of time and greed. The documents here contain the terms of your inheritance, which I've made ironclad. No one can sell, demolish, or alter this house without your explicit consent. The mansion is also protected under historical preservation laws, ensuring its integrity for future generations. You'll also find evidence of past disputes involving Evelyn's family and their attempts to manipulate me. I trusted you with this house because I know you share my values. Use this information wisely, Nathan, and remember, some battles are worth fighting, especially when it comes to preserving what matters most. With love and trust, James. I exhaled slowly, the weight of James's foresight settling over me. He hadn't just left me a house. He'd left me a shield. The legal documents in the folder confirmed everything the letter said. The inheritance terms were airtight, and the historical status of the mansion meant that any significant changes would require approval from multiple preservation boards. Evelyn's plans were doomed from the start. But what truly caught my attention was a stack of letters tucked beneath the legal papers. They were correspondence between James and Evelyn, dating back decades. The letters painted a picture of Evelyn as a cunning opportunist, constantly pushing boundaries to gain more control over the family's assets. James's responses were polite but firm, each one a reminder that he saw through her schemes. Clara arrived later that afternoon, and I showed her what I'd found. Her face lit up as she sifted through the documents. "Nathan, this is gold," she said. "Evelyn has no idea what she's up against. These inheritance terms are unbreakable, and this evidence of her past behavior will make it impossible for her to plead ignorance." We spent hours organizing the papers, ensuring we had everything ready for the confrontation I knew was coming. Evelyn wouldn't back down easily, but this time, I had the advantage. I wasn't just defending the mansion. I was defending James's legacy, armed with the very safeguards he'd put in place. That evening, as I stood in the study, I felt a sense of connection to James stronger than ever before. He had anticipated this battle, foreseen the challenges, and left me the tools to emerge victorious. His belief in me was a steady presence, guiding my every decision. The stage was set. Evelyn and Amanda thought they could manipulate and overpower me, but they had underestimated James's foresight and my resolve. The mansion wasn't just a prize to be won. It was a testament to resilience, history, and the values that truly mattered. Tomorrow, I would confront them with the truth. And this time, I wouldn't be standing alone. The morning of the confrontation arrived with an air of inevitability. I knew Evelyn wouldn't back down without a fight, and Amanda's loyalty was still firmly tethered to her mother. But this time, I had something they didn't: proof. Armed with James's ironclad inheritance terms and the damning evidence of Evelyn's financial schemes, I was ready to face them both. I invited them to the mansion under the guise of discussing renovations. Evelyn arrived promptly, as confident as ever, with Amanda trailing behind. Evelyn's smug expression didn't falter as she stepped into the study. She looked around, clearly imagining how she would transform it into her vision of luxury. "What's this about, Nathan?" Evelyn asked, feigning politeness. "I hope you've finally come to your senses about the renovations." Amanda said nothing, avoiding my gaze. Her silence was louder than words, a reminder of how far we had drifted apart. I took a deep breath and gestured for them to sit. "This isn't about renovations," I began, my voice steady. "It's about the truth, about this house, its legacy, and your intentions." Evelyn smirked. "Oh, Nathan, you're so dramatic. This house is falling apart. We're just trying to help you see reason." "Help me?" I repeated, the edge in my voice unmistakable. "By hiring contractors without my consent? By drafting plans to destroy everything James built?" This isn't help, Evelyn. This is greed. Her smirk wavered, but she quickly recovered. Nathan, don't be ridiculous. We're family. This house belongs to all of us. No, I said firmly. It doesn't. And I have proof. I reached for the folder I had prepared, pulling out the inheritance documents and placing them on the desk. These are the terms of the inheritance, I said, sliding the papers toward them. James made it clear. This house is mine. It cannot be sold, altered, or demolished without my explicit consent. Evelyn's face darkened as she skimmed the documents. This can't be right, she stammered. Surely there's a way around this. There isn't, I replied. James ensured it was airtight. And there's more. I handed her the letters Clara and I had uncovered, detailing Evelyn's history of manipulation and financial schemes. Amanda leaned over to read them, her face growing pale as the truth unraveled before her eyes. These letters, I continued, show exactly why James put those conditions in place. He knew what you were capable of, Evelyn. He knew you'd try to exploit his legacy for your own gain. Evelyn's composure cracked. She slammed the papers down and glared at me. You think you're so clever, don't you? She spat. James was a stubborn old man, and you're just as naive as he was. This house is a relic, Nathan, and you're too blind to see its potential. I held her gaze, unflinching. The potential you're talking about is destroying history for a quick profit. That's not going to happen. Not while I'm here. Amanda finally spoke, her voice trembling. Nathan, I didn't know. I didn't realize. You didn't want to realize, I said, cutting her off. You've sided with Evelyn every step of the way, ignoring everything this house stands for. Amanda's eyes filled with tears, but I didn't waver. The betrayal ran too deep. Evelyn, sensing her grip slipping, made one last attempt to regain control. This isn't over, she hissed. I'll find a way to. It is over, I interrupted. If you continue interfering, I'll take legal action. And with everything I've uncovered about your financial dealings, do you really want that? Her face twisted with fury, but she said nothing. The weight of the evidence against her was undeniable. She stood abruptly, motioning for Amanda to follow. Let's go, she snapped. Amanda hesitated, looking at me with pleading eyes. Nathan, please. I shook my head. It's too late, Amanda. You chose your side. Now you'll have to live with the consequences. They left the mansion in silence, Evelyn's heels clicking sharply against the floor. I watched them drive away, the weight of the confrontation settling over me. It wasn't the victory I had envisioned. It felt more like the end of a painful chapter. As I stood alone in the study, the house seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. James's legacy had been protected, but the cost was steep. I had lost my wife, my trust in her, and the family I thought we had built together. Still, I knew this was the right path. Some battles were worth fighting, and this one wasn't just for me. It was for James, for Mason, and for the generations to come. The war wasn't over, but the tide had turned in my favor. Now, it was time to rebuild, starting with the house that had stood its ground. The silence that filled the mansion after Evelyn and Amanda's departure was deafening. I walked the halls, feeling both relief and sadness. The confrontation had been necessary, but the emotional toll weighed heavily on me. Still, James's voice echoed in my mind. Stand firm, grandson. The battle was far from over, but the truth was now on my side. Clara called that evening, her tone cautious. Nathan, I've found something else, she began. It's about Evelyn. I think you need to see this. We met at the mansion the next morning. Clara arrived with a stack of papers and a determined look on her face. Evelyn's financial situation is worse than I thought, she said, spreading the documents across the study's desk. She's not just in debt. She's drowning. Failed investments, unpaid loans, lawsuits. She's desperate. I scanned the papers, my anger simmering, and she thought the mansion would be her way out. Clara nodded. Exactly. She planned to use the property's value to secure massive loans, assuming she could bully you into agreeing to renovations or a sale. I shook my head in disbelief. She spent her life manipulating people, and now she's dragging Amanda into it. Clara hesitated before continuing. There's more. Evelyn's reputation isn't just shaky, it's crumbling. I found evidence of fraudulent schemes she's been involved in, using shell companies to siphon funds. If this gets out, she'll face serious legal consequences. The weight of Clara's discovery hit me like a ton of bricks. Evelyn wasn't just an overbearing mother-in-law. She was a predator, willing to exploit anyone, even her own daughter, to save herself. And Amanda, whether out of loyalty or ignorance, had become her accomplice. "I need to show this to Amanda," I said, my voice resolute. "She needs to see the truth about her mother." Clara placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Be careful, Nathan. She's been under Evelyn's influence for years. This won't be easy for her to hear." That evening, I called Amanda and asked her to meet me at the mansion. She arrived reluctantly, her posture defensive. "What do you want, Nathan?" she asked, her tone cold but tinged with uncertainty. "I need to show you something," I said, leading her into the study. I laid the documents on the desk, pointing to the evidence Clara had uncovered. "This is who your mother really is, Amanda. She's not protecting you. She's using you." Amanda's eyes darted across the pages, her expression shifting from confusion to horror. "This can't be true," she whispered, her voice trembling. "She wouldn't." "She would," I interrupted. "And she has. Evelyn's been using you as a pawn to gain control of this house, just like she's manipulated everyone else in her life. Look at the facts, Amanda. It's all here." Tears welled up in her eyes as she stepped back, shaking her head. "I didn't know," she murmured. "I swear, Nathan, I didn't know." I wanted to believe her, but the damage was already done. Whether you knew or not, Amanda, you stood by her. You let her try to destroy everything James worked for. That's not something I can forgive. Her tears turned to anger. "You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to choose between you and my mother? She raised me, Nathan. I couldn't just turn my back on her." "And now you see the cost of that loyalty," I replied, my voice steady but firm. "Your mother doesn't care about you, Amanda. She cares about saving herself. You've been blind to it for years, and now it's too late." Amanda sank into a chair, her face buried in her hands. "What am I supposed to do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's up to you," I said. "But as far as this house is concerned, Evelyn's plans are finished. I won't let her manipulate me, you, or anyone else ever again." She left shortly after, her steps heavy and her spirit broken. Watching her go, I felt a pang of sadness. Despite everything, I had loved Amanda once. But love wasn't enough to erase betrayal. The revelation about Evelyn solidified my resolve. The mansion wasn't just a battleground. It was a testament to James's foresight and my responsibility to uphold his legacy. With Clara's help, I began preparing the next steps. Evelyn's schemes were unraveling, and Amanda's blind loyalty had been shattered. As I stood on the mansion's balcony that night, the cool breeze carrying the scent of rain, I felt a strange sense of peace. The truth was out, and the power dynamics had shifted. Evelyn and Amanda would have to face the consequences of their choices, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like the mansion was truly mine. The battle wasn't over, but the tide had turned. I wasn't just defending a house. I was defending a legacy, a history, and a future worth fighting for. Evelyn's fury knew no bounds. When Amanda shared the revelations about her mother's financial schemes and the ironclad terms of the inheritance, Evelyn's response was a mix of denial and desperation. But even her sharp tongue and manipulative tactics couldn't change the facts. Her carefully constructed empire of deceit was crumbling, and she had no one to blame but herself. Word of Evelyn's fraudulent dealings began to spread, thanks to Clara's meticulous work. She had discreetly shared the evidence with key contacts in the business community, and the fallout was swift. Evelyn's name, once synonymous with prestige, became a warning sign for anyone who valued their reputation. Lawsuits were filed, creditors came knocking, and her lavish lifestyle began to unravel. Amanda, caught between loyalty to her mother and the painful truth, grew increasingly despondent. She returned to the mansion one evening, her face pale and drawn. "Nathan," she began, her voice trembling, "she's lost everything. The debts, the lawsuits, it's all too much. She doesn't know what to do." I leaned against the study's desk, arms crossed. Evelyn made her choices, Amanda. She thought she could manipulate everyone around her, and now she's facing the consequences. She's my mother, Amanda said, tears welling up in her eyes. I can't just abandon her. I softened slightly, but my resolve remained firm. I'm not asking you to abandon her, Amanda, but I won't let her drag me, or this house, down with her. James knew what she was capable of, and that's why he put those safeguards in place. He trusted me to protect this legacy, and I won't let him down. Amanda sat down heavily, her head in her hands. I didn't know it would come to this, she whispered. I thought she was just trying to help. I sighed, feeling a pang of sympathy despite everything. Your mother isn't interested in helping anyone but herself. She's been using you, Amanda, just like she's used everyone else. The weight of my words seemed to sink in. Amanda nodded slowly, her tears falling onto the floor. I don't know how to fix this, she admitted. You can't, I said gently but firmly. Evelyn has to face the consequences of her actions. And you have to decide whether you're going to keep following her down this path or start rebuilding your own life. Amanda's silence was deafening. She left shortly after, retreating to her own world of confusion and regret. Evelyn, meanwhile, was not so quiet. She stormed into the mansion the next day, her desperation masked by a veneer of defiance. You think you've won, don't you? She spat, her voice trembling with rage. You think you're so righteous, so untouchable. But this isn't over, Nathan. I stood my ground, meeting her glare without flinching. It is over, Evelyn. You've lost. The mansion is untouchable, your schemes are exposed, and the people you've manipulated are finally seeing you for who you really are. It's time for you to face reality. Evelyn's composure cracked. You don't understand, she said, her voice breaking. I did everything for my family, for Amanda. I just wanted what was best for her. Best for her? I repeated, my tone incredulous. You used her, Evelyn. You used everyone around you to try and save yourself. That's not love, that's greed. Her shoulders sagged as the fight drained out of her. For the first time, she looked her age, tired, defeated, and vulnerable. What am I supposed to do now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. That's up to you, I replied. But whatever it is, it won't involve this house or my family. Evelyn left the mansion that day, her defeat palpable. Her empire of deceit had collapsed, and with it, her influence over Amanda. The woman who had once loomed large in my life was now just a shadow, a cautionary tale of what happens when greed and manipulation go unchecked. Amanda, too, began to distance herself from Evelyn, though it was clear the process was painful for her. She apologized to me more than once, but the trust between us was irreparably broken. The marriage we had built was a casualty of Evelyn's schemes, and no amount of regret could change that. As I watched the two of them retreat into their separate worlds, I felt a strange mix of emotions, sadness for what had been lost, but also relief for what had been preserved. The mansion stood tall and unyielding, a testament to James's foresight and resilience. The battle for the house was over, but the lessons it had taught me would stay with me forever. Some legacies are worth fighting for, and some people, no matter how close, are better left behind. The mansion, now free from the grip of Evelyn's manipulative schemes, seemed to breathe anew. Every creak of its wooden floors, every whisper of wind through its stained glass windows felt alive again, as if the house itself recognized the peace that had finally settled over it. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself a moment to reflect, not on the battles fought, but on the possibilities ahead. Amanda's departure had been inevitable. She moved out a week after Evelyn's collapse, leaving behind a note that said little but spoke volumes. I need time to find myself, it read. I'm sorry for everything. I wasn't angry anymore. In fact, I felt a quiet sense of closure. Amanda's loyalty to her mother had driven a wedge between us, but her acknowledgement of her mistakes felt like the first honest gesture she'd made in a long time. Clara, ever the dependable friend, continued to be my anchor. So, what's next? She asked one evening as we sat in the study, the fire casting warm shadows on the walls. I'm not sure, I admitted. This house has always been James's legacy, but I want to make it my own too. Something that honors him, but also feels like me." She smiled, her gaze thoughtful. "Then let's make it happen." Together, we began brainstorming ideas. The mansion's historical significance made it a prime candidate for restoration and public engagement. Clara suggested turning it into a museum, a space where visitors could immerse themselves in its rich history and appreciate its architectural beauty. The idea resonated with me. It was a way to preserve James's legacy while creating something meaningful for the community. The work was daunting but fulfilling. I hired skilled craftsmen and preservation experts, ensuring every detail of the mansion's restoration was handled with care. Clara took charge of curating the exhibits, diving into the family archives to uncover treasures that had been tucked away for decades. Old photographs, handwritten letters, and even James's journals found new life as part of the mansion's narrative. The transformation wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. As the mansion regained its grandeur, I felt myself healing alongside it. The anger and betrayal that had consumed me began to fade, replaced by a sense of purpose. James's voice seemed to echo in my mind, a steady reminder that resilience and integrity always outlast greed and deceit. Evelyn, on the other hand, had retreated into obscurity. Her financial ruin was complete, and the once formidable woman who had tried to dominate my life was now a distant memory. I heard whispers through mutual acquaintances. She had moved into a modest apartment, her social circle dwindled to almost nothing. Amanda visited her occasionally, but their relationship was strained. Evelyn's downfall had cost her not just her wealth, but also the loyalty of those closest to her. As for Amanda, she remained a complex figure in my mind. I learned she had started therapy, trying to untangle the years of manipulation and control she'd endured under Evelyn's influence. Part of me hoped she would find peace, even if it meant we would never reconnect. I wasn't bitter anymore. I simply wanted us both to move forward. The grand reopening of the mansion as a historical landmark was a moment I'll never forget. Friends, neighbors, and even former colleagues gathered on the sprawling lawn as I cut the ribbon. Clara stood beside me, her presence a quiet affirmation of everything we had accomplished together. The applause was thunderous, but it was the quiet moments that followed. Walking through the halls, hearing the murmurs of visitors marveling at the history, that truly filled me with pride. Mason, my son, visited the mansion often, his laughter echoing through the halls. He didn't fully understand the significance of what we had done, but I knew one day he would. The mansion wasn't just a house. It was a symbol of perseverance, of standing firm in the face of adversity, and of the strength that comes from knowing who you are. As I sat in the study that evening, watching the firelight dance across James's portrait, I felt a profound sense of peace. The battles had been hard-fought, the losses painful, but the victories were sweeter for it. I had reclaimed not just a house, but a legacy, and in doing so, I had found myself. Clara walked in, carrying 2 glasses of wine. She handed me one and raised hers in a toast. "To the mansion," she said, her smile warm, "and to the man who never gave up on it." I clinked my glass against hers, the sound a quiet celebration of everything we had endured and achieved. "To the future," I replied, and for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to embrace it. The mansion stood resplendent under the glow of the morning sun, its restored beauty a testament to resilience, perseverance, and the power of standing one's ground. As I walked through the halls, now filled with the hum of visitors marveling at its history, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The journey had been grueling, but the outcome was worth every sleepless night and hard-fought battle. The grand opening had been just the beginning. The mansion quickly became a beloved landmark, drawing history enthusiasts, architecture lovers, and curious locals eager to learn about its storied past. Guided tours highlighted James's life, the family legacy, and the meticulous restoration process that brought the house back to life. The study, once the battleground for my confrontation with Evelyn and Amanda, became a centerpiece of the narrative, a symbol of triumph over greed and betrayal. Mason grew to love the mansion as much as I did. He often accompanied me on weekends, exploring every nook and cranny with wide-eyed wonder. Grandpa James would be proud, wouldn't he, Dad? He asked one afternoon as we stood by the grand staircase. His words warmed my heart. He would, I replied, ruffling his hair. And so am I. Evelyn's shadow, once so oppressive, had faded into insignificance. The exposure of her financial schemes had left her disgraced, her once commanding presence reduced to a cautionary tale. Amanda, though still grappling with the aftermath of her choices, occasionally sent updates about her progress. She was working through her issues, attempting to rebuild her life independently. While our paths had diverged, I harbored no ill will. The pain of betrayal had given way to a quiet indifference, and I wished her well from afar. Clara remained a constant presence, her support invaluable as the mansion transitioned into a new chapter. We worked closely to expand its offerings, hosting community events, educational workshops, and even seasonal festivities. The mansion became a hub of activity, a place where memories were made and history was celebrated. One evening, as the last group of visitors departed, Clara and I sat on the front porch, sipping tea and watching the sun dip below the horizon. "You did it, Nathan," she said, her voice filled with pride. "James would be over the moon." "We did it," I corrected, giving her a grateful smile. "I couldn't have done this without you." She laughed softly. "Well, you're stuck with me now. I'm not letting you run this place alone." We sat in comfortable silence, the weight of the past finally lifted. The mansion, once a symbol of strife and conflict, now stood as a beacon of hope and renewal. It was more than just a house. It was a living, breathing testament to the idea that some legacies are worth fighting for. As the stars began to dot the night sky, I felt a deep sense of peace. The mansion's story wasn't just about James's vision or Evelyn's greed. It was about the enduring strength of family, the value of integrity, and the unyielding belief in doing what's right. The battles I had fought against Evelyn, Amanda, and even my own doubts had forged a new path, one filled with purpose and fulfillment. I had reclaimed not just a house, but a part of myself that I had almost lost in the chaos. The lessons learned along the way would stay with me forever, guiding me as I continued to honor James's legacy and build one of my own. The mansion's lights cast a warm glow across the lawn, and as I stood to head inside, I felt a quiet confidence that this was just the beginning. The future was bright, and for the first time in years, I was ready to embrace it wholeheartedly. This was my story now, and it was one I would tell with pride.